Here we go. All right. Welcome to the Restaurants Grow podcast, where you get tips, tricks, and tactics on how to grow your restaurant business. Today on the show, we have Geoffrey Toffetti, CEO of Frontline Performance Group. They help restaurants with innovative strategies to empower frontline teams, enhance guest experiences, and drive revenue through growth, through service-based sales and performance accountability. Man, that's important stuff. They have developed Engage, a data-driven platform that helps hospitality service businesses to maximize revenue through service-based sales techniques. We'll get into some of that today. Geoff has worked with some big hotel brands like Marriott, Hilton, and Hyatt. They have a few locations. They probably served a few people, and is now working to empower restaurants to bring together service and sales. I am super excited to have him on the show. I think what they're doing is so important for our industry. Geoff brings a practical lens to building high-performance cultures in hospitality. I think making things easy to understand and easy to execute is not only a skill set, it is exactly what our industry needs. So, fun fact: Geoff is an avid reader, and loves science fiction and fantasy novels. Geoff, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here with you. I appreciate you having me.
Likewise. I have one quick question. What was there like one science fiction sort of novel or book in your childhood that was the one that just put you into that?
Yeah, there was a book called Gord the Rogue, written by Gary Gygax, the guy who founded Dungeons and Dragons. And that once I read that, I was hooked. And then it was on to bigger books like Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. But that book for sure, I was 14. And that's when it lit the fire in me, because reading for school is not fun, but reading Gary Gygax was fun. And obviously Dragonlance Chronicles. Anyone listening that's into D&D will know the Dragonlance Chronicles. But yeah, that was where it started.
I had a class in my 11th grade of school that was literally called science fiction reading. And our teacher was so passionate about science fiction novels that he would act them out in class. He made it fun to read. I think that's so important. Anyway,
are you still a science fiction fan?
I don't read fiction books at all. It's not what I'm into, but I will watch fiction content. So
gotcha.
I'm more of an educational reader, but the show's not about me. But
yeah, I know that's true.
How much? Let's get right into this. How much money do you think is left on the table by servers and bartenders who are not upselling enough? By the way,
20 to 25%.
By the way, totally happened to me last night.
Yeah, it happens. I was just you can imagine in my world, everywhere I go, I'm assessing the revenue loss, opportunity loss. We were at one of the nicest restaurants in Boston. They have a signature steak that's $200. It's imported from Italy. It's unbelievable. The waiter never even mentioned it. It was unbelievable. And we would have bought it. We would 100% bought it, but he didn't mention it. So our analysis shows it's between 20 and 25% from the same guests, same servers on shift. You're looking at about 25% loss, just because they're not performing consistently. They're not trained. They're not upselling. They're not incentivized for some reason. The tip isn't enough. There's something missing from the equation. But if you take your servers and rank them, say by revenue per guest, which is the metric we prefer, because it's, the check is kind of can be deceiving. Take your revenue per guest and you take your top 20% on revenue per guest and you apply it to everyone else, you're going to see about a 20 to 25% differential.
I was going to ask you how you calculate that, and you just went into it anyway.
Yeah.
I was at a dive bar last night. Okay. A dive bar. And it was a place that's really known for grilled cheeseburgers and cold beer. And I was like, I want a cheeseburger.
I know you're a cheeseburger guy.
I am. And I sat down, and the lady came over to me, the bartender, and she was perfectly nice. And she's like, how can I help you? And I was like, I'll take a high life, a cheeseburger, and tots. There was no, do you want a sidecar shot? There was no, do you want to upgrade to bacon? There was no, do you want loaded tots? Do you want fries and rings? Do you want an extra patty? I was like, even if I said no to all of it, it's sort of the thing, you miss all the swings you don't take, right?
That's right. And, there's very simple tactics. Things like we have a phrase we like that isn't don't ask, tell. So it'd be better to say, you want onion rings, right? Or I'll replenish your beer when it's empty. And then all they have to do is nod and you've got an automatic replenishment. It's that kind of stuff it's not super complicated. It's common sense, but in a lot of times it's not commonplace because the restaurant manager or owner doesn't have time to train everyone, or it's hard to recognize the behaviors because they're across the room. You don't know what they're saying. So having a deep analytics component that simplifies this stuff and then distills it back to the manager in a way that says, Geoff is not replenishing alcohol as frequently as everyone else. Here's a video he should watch, or here's some things you can say to him to help him with that. That's what we're doing. We're taking very noisy data, very hard to distill if you're a restaurant manager, you're not a data analyst, and we're boiling it down into common sense, common language, and saying, here's what you need to do to improve your revenue per guest. And these are where the deficits are occurring. This is why these two different people are both 20% below on the leaderboard, but for completely different reasons. What are those reasons, and what can you do about it? That's our whole mission.
I go back to one of my first hospitality jobs. I ran the drive-thru at McDonald's, right? And I was 16, and I was the guy. They were like, "Could we give you more shifts?" And I was like, "No, I'm 16. Like, I want to hang out with my friends, and I have homework, and I don't really need $4.85 an hour." But sure. And it was simple. Like, I literally would just ask every single guest, "Do you want fries with that? Do you want a Coke? Do you want apple pie?" And like, to me, it just felt like, isn't that what I'm supposed to do? Like, it didn't feel like a rocket science. But even back then, like, it just like some people had the skills and some didn't. So let me ask you this question. Why do you think that happens? Like, why are some people float to the top, some people float to the bottom, and then like kind of nothing happens in the middle?
Yeah, I think there's an intrinsic capability or intrinsic motivation factor to it, like you were intrinsically motivated to offer. But why that happens, why it stratifies like that, is because the leadership or the management, they're not looking at it that way. They're not saying, how much is the top doing? Let's say items per check, or whatever the metric is that in a McDonald's is most relevant. Average value per order, whatever the metric is. And they're not laying them out on a leaderboard and then trying to understand why there's a difference and then training them to do different things. Because you're going to have people that, in that example of $4.85 an hour, my first job was $5, but yeah. At that pay level, they're doing the minimum to not get fired. That's generally what the average kind of state is. But there are people that perform well above that. And the difference between those two things is what we call discretionary effort. So no matter what field you're in, what role you're in, you're always going to have people that are always very energetic. They're giving it everything they've got. And then you've got the guys punching the clock. Like, he won't stay a minute later, and they're out the door as long as they don't get fired. And our mission over the last 30 years has been, how do we unlock discretionary effort? And that's the core question you're asking, is what is it that prevents or enables people to give more? And it really comes down to a couple simple things. One is accountability. So do you expect them to do more? Are you telling them that your expectation is more than they're doing? Reward, which is some kind of incentive for doing it. And recognition, that when they do it, you recognize them, and when they don't, you recognize that too. Those three components are what drive the front line to perform. So when we started building technology, we built a technology to hit all three of those things.
I'm going to go on a tangent here that I think is relevant, and I'd really love your thoughts. I was at a networking dinner last night, and this came up, and I have very strong feelings about it. I'm curious for yours. Most of the conversation was about the market and returns, and McDonald's is down. We should all expect to be down, blah, 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 blah. And, what's third party doing, all this other stuff. And I was like, I think everybody's wrong. I think you're all looking at this from like the CFO's perspective, right? And this should be an experience perspective. Did somebody come in, right? Did they have a good time? Did they like it? Did my team make sure they extended good hospitality, right? If they did that, then saying, do you want bacon on your hamburger? Would you like an extra drink? I'm going to refill your beer. At that point, like, it just kind of naturally happens. Am I off my rocker here, or is that where we're at?
No, that you're exactly right. We have clients that let's say in hotels, because we've been in it longer, in a down economy are still outperforming the market, by a ridiculous amount, because they are focusing on their team and enabling and encouraging the team to focus on the guest. And it has to be intentional. One of my favorite kind of leadership mottos is, you can expect your guests to be treated exactly the way you treat the people you lead. So if you're leading through enthusiasm, positivity, engagement, people are free to make mistakes, you have an open line of communication, then they're going to build a really strong rapport with your guests, and guests are going to feel nurtured and cared for. If you're treating them like they're a soldier and they have to follow the chain of command and everything is super regimented, well, that's how they're going to treat the guest. They're going to be pushing them out the door. They're not going to be, nurturing that experience, as you said. So you're right on the money. And I will say, in the last year, I've spoken to hundreds of people in the restaurant environment, some serving it and some owning restaurants, some managing restaurants, obviously in the hotel companies. And one thing that I could tell you consistently does not come up unless we bring it up is the revenue performance of the server on every check. It isn't something they're talking about. It's exactly what you're saying. They're looking at macro trends, or they're looking at food trends, or they're looking at who the exciting chefs are. And they're not thinking about that 20 to 25% differential on every shift of every day of every year of why the servers are not selling more. What is the underlying issues there that they can address? It's startling. I mean, I talked to one gentleman who buys and sells restaurant companies. He's a private equity, but it's all restaurants. And he said in like the 200 due diligence deals that he's done, not one time was it ever mentioned how productive the servers are. And he buys and sells restaurants for a living. He's, extraordinarily wealthy. He's like, I've never even thought about it before. And I happened to be sitting at the table with him eating a meal. And it was like we were in a Four Seasons restaurant. You expect it to be as good as it can get. And I said, what has this server recommended to you since we've been sitting here? And he's like, nothing. And I was like, exactly. He recommended nothing to you. He's taking your order. And we know that order takers don't produce a lot of revenue.
I mean, you're like tugging on all my heartstrings right now, because I own a restaurant, but for me, it's the love of the service that motivates all of these things. I enjoy making people happy. And our CEO at Salad House, we like making people smile through their stomach. It's an inherent thing. I have a question here, and I think it's kind of important for us to sort of dig into this before we go deeper. But is this relevant just for fine dining and full service, or is this all models? Where do you see this?
It's everything. We're piloting some quick service and even some marketplace in hotels. There's the marketplace. It's like a Starbucks, and we're having success there too. As long as there's more than one employee in the organization, our methodology works. But even just a single employee, if you're measuring them and you're giving them a goal that can be measured and you're showing it to them, because that's a unique thing about what we do is the servers, the bartenders, the counter clerks, they actually have an app that shows their productivity, their tip earnings. If you put a goal out, how they're tracking to their goal, how they rank against their peers, it's all in their hands, which is shockingly no one's ever done before, and that we've seen in food and beverage. So it's enabling them to understand how they're doing and how you think they should be doing. Because think about this. You've been in the business far longer than me. How often do servers know exactly where they rank in the outlet on the given shift they've worked on a revenue per guest level?
Maybe never.
Maybe never. Even the big organizations that you think would have this figured out don't. We're supporting a client in Latin America that's in the billions of food and beverage revenue, and they have no idea. They don't know how it's doing. They also don't have a method to benchmark, upsell incremental revenue performance across different outlet types. So you could have your quick service, let's say a burger stand, and you have a fine dining establishment, seafood place. How do you know pound for pound how well they're selling? There's no metric for that. I mean, you could look at revenue per guest, but it's not measuring pound for pound. You can't compare lobster and a burger and say revenue per guest, right? There's no anchor metric that will do it. So we're actually developing it. I just saw my first in production mock-ups of it, but it's to enable restaurateurs that have multiple outlets to benchmark, or even if you have a chain of the same restaurants, to benchmark them against each other and benchmark servers against each other. These are just things that, to our great fortune, doesn't exist. So that's what we're bringing. That's the only thing we're focused on, is what are the servers doing? Do they have visibility, and how do you improve their performance?
Okay. Let's say somebody's listening to this right now and they're like, man, I didn't even think about this. I need to think about this. What's the calculation, or how could somebody go and get some data this afternoon that would help them like realize what the opportunity is? Like, is there a simple formula? Do they go in their POS? Like, what would be
Yeah,
step?
if I were going to do it without our technology, you would go into your POS, you would pull down. I mean, in a lot of cases, we see you have to run it by server individually, but I would do that. I would download server revenue per guest. Ideally, if you don't have per guest, then do per cover or per check. Pull it down for each server, put it in a spreadsheet, and force rank them and say the top average is, this person down to the bottom average. And I would put that on the wall in the back room. And I would do that like once a week. And I would say the most improved between this week and next week, I'm going to give them $100, because they're going to just the effort to move is going to generate huge amounts of opportunity. But that would be the simplest way, is just put them on a piece of paper, stick it on the wall, and then give them an incentive to move up the chart.
Okay, I understand why an operator would care, right? Obviously, it's revenue, it's a business. But like when it comes to the employees, what do they need and want in this situation? Is it literally just money? Like the servers or the cash register people, like they're literally just motivated with money, or is it something else?
There's three things, and I mentioned them earlier, but money is definitely one. And if you're in an environment where tips don't exist, then I would create an incentive for achieving higher results. I mean, it's very simple. Set a goal. Above that, you get 5% or 25 cents per check or whatever. But money is definitely one of them. The other two things are accountability. So have you ever said to them, you need to sell more, and this is how much more we need you to sell? If not, then how can you expect them to know what they might think they're doing a great job, because you've never said anything about it, right? So tell them that you have a higher expectation. And then when they do it, publicly recognize them. In your stand-up, your pre-shift, say, hey, Geoff increased his revenue per check by $10. He did exactly what we wanted. Great job. That alone will get someone moving and get other people moving, because they're going to want that recognition. And the reality is, these three triggers apply to three different personality types. Some people want accountability, some people want money, some people want recognition. Everyone wants a little of all, but one of those three is going to be the primary for everyone on your team. So if you're doing all three, you're going to get the whole team moving.
Okay, that makes sense to me. We are talking about guest-facing employees here. Does the rest of the team play a role in this? Like, is back of the house a part of this? Is, the busboy, the porter, like the stock shelf, like, do these people play a role in it?
They definitely play a role in the guest experience. We don't focus on back of the house. For 30 years, we've only supported frontline teams that are guest facing. And right now we're supporting somewhere around 50,000, 60,000 frontline employees in our company.
Wow.
So that's our mindset. But from a service standpoint, everything has to do with everything. I mean, whoever it is responsible for sweeping up the garbage on the front sidewalk has an impact on the guest experience, right? So that's a cultural thing that has to come from the leadership down, is that it doesn't have to be like a militant pursuit of perfection, but it has to be recognize that if you walk past that piece of trash on the ground, you're setting your restaurant up for failure, because someone might be offended by that. Let's all be in the mindset of creating a clean, fun, safe environment for our guests. So that definitely has a huge part of it. But I always say, if you have a terrific server, like a great server, the food could be mediocre and you're coming back. If you have amazing food and a crappy server, you're not coming back. The server or the bartender is the brand. It is your identity to the guest. So that's why we choose to focus on the front. And it's true at a hotel. You walk in and check in at the front desk, they can make or break your stay. If they're rude, you're put off to the whole property. So that frontline employee is the manifestation of your brand. And the other thing that I would love your input on this, it seems to us that the restaurant owners don't view the servers as a revenue center, as a business within a business. And if you think about it, in a decently priced restaurant, that's a 6-figure revenue stream in the hands of that individual. If they were thinking about their business being a revenue center, that's all their energy. But the servers, they don't seem to think of them that way.
I totally agree. I think it's like they don't see themselves as having a sales job. right? They see themselves as what an order taker, or it's my job to bring this from here to there, or to take that from there to there. Like you're just a runner. But I don't think people get trained at the, like, this is a sales job. Your job is sales, and the thing that you will be benchmarked by is sales. I just don't think we do that. But I'm sure some of the higher performing, but I think as an industry, like, that is kind of the missing energy.
Yeah, and what's fascinating to us is that there's a built-in financial benefit, especially at a table service or at a bar, because the more revenue you sell, the more tip you're going to make. But yet there still seems to be a disconnect that the revenue is the revenue, and I'll get tipped on whatever it is. Not that I can influence it by 20 or 25% and give myself a 25% raise. And then on top of that, if I do a better job, I get a higher tip average. So it's more than, I might get a 30% benefit to my pay. Who wouldn't want a 30% raise next year?
I'll take one tomorrow.
I would too.
By the way, I feel actually pretty strongly that it's not just full service. I drink a lot of espresso, and I like to go to coffee shops to get espresso. And I'm telling you, Geoff, that 9 out of 10 times I walk into a coffee shop and I walk up and they just look at me. There's no welcome to this coffee shop. What do you like to drink? There's no how's your day going? Like, they just look at me like I'm just going to walk in and go, I would like an espresso. Like, they don't even ask anymore, can I take your order? And I'm like,
it's mind-boggling.
Right. Now, here's the other thing too. Modern era, it's the end of 2025. We are all now paying with our cards at a Toast portal or Square or Clover, and they have the tip right there. So, like, there is a clear financial impact to the person that didn't ask me what I wanted to order.
Like, 100%.
Like, it boggles my mind that that's not already part of the culture. If I was standing behind the cash register, and I don't want to be like kids these days.
Yeah.
But like, if I'm standing behind the cash register, you walk into my place and I know that you're going to put your card down there and decide between 10, 15, and 20. You're getting 25% level service here because I want you to hit the last button.
That's right. I want you to hit the custom button and write in a 40% tip. It is sort of, it might be generational. It might not. I mean, the front line, there's probably still people. I encounter people sometimes that are doing a great job, but you're exactly right. We did a widespread study for a client. It was a theme park company, and they had hundreds of food stations throughout their environment. And this was the test that we did as part of this was back when we were a consulting firm. We went up to every single one of them and ordered a bottle of water, regardless of what the food stand's purpose was. Not one time in hundreds of occasions did they offer the primary product of the food stand. It could be churros, it could be bananas, it could be smoothies, beer, whatever. They never once said, you want a churro, right? I mean, you walked up to the churro stand, not one time. It was so eye-opening to the company. They were like blown away. And that's kind of so I agree. Marketplaces, counter-based food, for us, it's like our first foray into restaurants is in the hospitality industry because that we have thousands of clients. So it just makes sense. And there's not a lot of those in hospitality, but we do have some that we're working with on a test basis, independent, that are walk-up counter service, and it's having an impact because. Again, what is the expectation? Is the expectation that you take their order and you don't say anything to them? Or is it that whatever they order, you modify it? You assume that they want a modifier or they want an add-on. And if you do that 100% of the time, you're probably going to get a 15% conversion, which is going to increase your check average by 5 or 6%. And we know in food and beverage, 6% revenue improvement, it could double your bottom line. I mean, it seems like for us, it's like the fruit is like sagging on the tree. It's not just low hanging. It's like about to fall off, and people aren't grabbing it.
I could go on for this in hours about this. Who should own this in the organization?
That's a great question. If it's a restaurant group, I would say the owner should own it initially, and then it should be each outlet manager should be responsible for implementing the things that are going to get this done. But if it's not someone who ultimately is looking at it as in totality of value, then you're going to have a mismatch because someone might be like, well, my job isn't that. My job it needs to be whoever cares the most about the bottom line needs to own it initially and drive it as an initiative. In hospitality, it tends to be like regional F&B leaders, but in restaurants, it's probably the owner, or whoever the owner has delegated the operation of their business to.
Yeah, I think that there's a perception out there that it is hard to train service. And I just think that maybe there's just not been a method of training that's been available. Like we don't have the playbook, you know what I mean? But and why it might be natural to somebody and not natural to another person, I think is really just a function of not prioritizing the teaching of the thing. You know what I mean?
Of course. And we recognized also that in food and beverage, there is not a standard sales and service process. If you want to have a successful sales organization, you have to have a sales process and people have to be trained to that. So we developed one. Again, our DNA is consulting. We call it the 5-course framework. It basically distills down the fundamentals of service and sales in food and beverage. And that's the foundation of all of our digital trainings. We have hundreds of videos that are very skill specific and they're rooted in this process because that's missing. So if you're an independent restaurant, you've got 30 employees or whatever, you're not going to have access to the kind of training that the Four Seasons offers, but we can bring it because we did the training for Four Seasons. We do the training for Ritz-Carlton. We understand high caliber service in a very rapid transactional environment. And that's all included in what we do.
Why don't we take a second to talk about what you do? Want to explain that to people here?
Yeah. So we've been around 33 years. We're called Frontline Performance Group for a reason. As I said, we only help frontline teams improve performance, and we always focus in areas where revenue can be affected. For 25 years of that time, we embedded consultants in our client environments. So they were living, breathing the environment with them and teaching the frontline teams kind of elbow to elbow, even demonstrating for them in a lot of cases. And then we started building a technology to house all of our digital training and things. And then COVID hit and we couldn't go on site for years. So we basically became a SaaS company, and we took everything that we know and all the tools that we use, and we put them in a platform, and we take data out of the POS or PMS, and we give the servers visibility to what they're doing. We track their goals and their incentives. We do all the analytics for you. And now with the advent of AI, we're actually able to deliver what we call AI insights back to the managers, as I was mentioning earlier, that are natural language. They don't even have to read the reports anymore. It's going to tell them exactly what's going on. It's going to say, you need to talk to Mary about replenishment. You need to talk to Tom about, appetizer sales. You need to talk to this person about that. And by the way, here's a video for each of them that's a minute long that will do all the talking for you. You don't actually have to talk to them. Just tell them to watch the video. And it'll also tell you who your best performers are and who's improved the most. And we actually have a section where in your pre-shifts, here's who you should recognize and what you should say about them. So the AI is taking all of our 30 years of experience and making it very, very tactical for managers so they can actually affect revenue. They can actually affect it.
That sounds awesome. I love that make natural language. You just talk to me like I'm a person. How does that, in your system, how does that get then distilled down to the employee? Does the manager have to send them a text message, or does it work in the platform? Like, how does that work?
Yeah, so they have their own app or their own access on the web, and they will be notified if a video is recommended to them. But we encourage the manager to say something like, I think you should watch this video. It's in your recommended file. That way it's connecting their leadership to the outcome or the activity that you want. But we think managers in 15 minutes a day could increase their revenue 10 to 15%. So that's not a lot to ask. It's very easy for them to do, and it doesn't distract them from all the other stuff they have to do. It just makes it a priority among priorities.
I could see somebody going, oh, so you're just telling me I need to get my team to upsell. It's more than that, right? It's not just, okay. But
like the videos would be, like, let's say that your drink replenishment rate is, 1.1 per check and 1.8 is the standard in your outlet. So it's easy for the system to say, okay, you're below. So we're going to actually recommend videos that are going to teach you how to replenish. What are the dialogues to use? Like, for instance, here's 2 principles, and this is free for anyone listening. As soon as someone sits down, get a drink in their hand before you do anything else. Don't even ask about water. Take a drink order. It starts the dining experience early, and it leaves you room for an extra rate of replenishment, which it could be 20% to the check. And then if it's busy, just say to them, we're very busy. Would you like me to replenish your drinks when your food comes? You've just guaranteed 2 rounds of drinks on that check. And you could see how fast that was. It's 5 seconds of dialogue. And if you're nodding yes when you're asking, the mirror neurons in the guests, they're more likely to start nodding yes. It's just neuroscience. So when you say you want a replenishment with your meal, they're going to be like, yeah. And then you've just sold a whole nother round of drinks, which could be, 15, 20% of the check. So the video teaches them the tactics. The manager doesn't have to be an expert at sales at the table. We'll do that for them. They just have to set the stage that there's an expectation and that you want them to use the tools we're providing, and it's going to have a massive impact on it could be, 15% of your revenue.
I love this. All right, Jeff, unfortunately, we got to wrap up the show here. This has been really insightful. I think that there's a massive opportunity here to make more money by being more service oriented. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Yeah, our website is always the best. We keep it very up to date. There's a lot of case studies and things on there. It's Frontline PG, like paulgeorge.com. And then me personally on LinkedIn, I'm very active on LinkedIn, as is the company, so you can find me there. But there's a little I'd like to know more form on the website. That's a great way to get in touch with us.
Awesome. Well, Geoff, thank you for joining us today. It's been a really great conversation. If you enjoyed this conversation, please jam that subscribe button on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you guys like to join in. Thank you very much.